All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome again, everyone. Thank you for being here with us and participating at the last Piers 5 for 2024. I'm Adrienne Tadella. I am CGHE's Knowledge Management Specialist, and just welcome everybody for being here. This is going to be a great session where we'll hear from Alice Tsai, the Health Security Advisor at the Center for Excellence in Disaster Management and Humanitarian Assistance, and then just give an insight to humanitarian assistance and disaster relief stakeholders in what the intersection is between HADR and global health engagement in strengthening capacity building in our allies and partner nations, as well as our own organizations. So, without further ado, I would like to remind people that this meeting is being recorded and we'll share follow-up materials afterwards. We are going to proceed with the presentation first, and so if there are any questions or comments that you would like to bring up at the discussion, please go ahead and drop them in the chat. And then we'll make sure to bring them back when we're in our discussion section. All right, so with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague, our Senior Advisor for Knowledge Management, Dr. Ramy Wilson, to start us off.
Okay, great. Thanks, Adrienne. And, on behalf of Colonel Elizabeth Erickson, our director, and all the staff from the Center for Global Health Engagement, I really would like to welcome everybody and thank you for participating in this event. And this is our final event of our inaugural year, and so we look really forward to the next calendar year where we hope to increase the number of these events, ideally up to once a month, but right now we're shooting for 4 to 5 throughout the year, kind of once a quarter. But as interest grows and people are interested in being a part of this and presenting their story and telling about their organizations for the group, I think we want to be responsive to the interest that the community has shown so far. So thank you for your participation. We know that today's presentation is a little off from our normal schedule in terms of the timing, and normally we have it during the East Coast lunch hour, but that it was to accommodate our speaker, who I'm very excited to have with us today, and she's calling in literally from the opposite side of the world. It's like almost midnight where she is, and so I'm just really excited at. So let me introduce Alice. So Alice Tsai is the Health Security Advisor at the Center for Excellence in Disaster Management and Humanitarian Assistance. She serves as the Health Security Advisor at the Center, and she's responsible for the planning, development, and execution of the bi- and multilateral engagements to strengthen ally and partner nations' readiness and disaster planning and associated capacity building efforts through civ-mil cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region, which really almost sounds like it's like straight off the DoD for global health engagement. Some highlights of her experience: she basically had assignments and on-the-ground experience with the 2014 Ebola response in West Africa, the 2017 Irma and Maria hurricane recovery, and the COVID-19 response, which we are all still recovering from. Some of her previous work before being at the center, she worked at GHE, which is part of the DoD in terms of the emerging infectious disease systems, which is part of our surveillance program, as well as working at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the CDC, as well as a technical consultant to the Civil Sector Society, and was a U.S. Fulbright Fellow in China early in her career. She, like a lot of GHE practitioners, I think are very interesting people. I think she now has the record of a number of bachelor degrees that I've had one person actually earn. So she has bachelors of science in biochemistry and cellular biology, and 2 bachelors of arts in healthcare, social issues, and music, which apparently she is quite the pianist during her study in California. So Alice, I'd like to thank you for joining us. I know, this is not a convenient time for you, and especially as we get close to the holidays. So thank you for carving out a little bit of time. What I'd like to do is go ahead and turn it over to you. And just for the audience, kind of our normal format is we usually have our invited guests give a brief kind of introduction to kind of their center or their work or kind of their focus area Usually that'll be about 15 to 20 minutes. And then after that, we will open it up for discussion. I'll start with a couple questions. I would ask the group to post if you have any comments or questions or points that you'd like to highlight to the group. Use the chat function in this event. If you're not available to engage in the chat function and you have a question that you would like for us to engage, you can respond to the GHE email and we will get that posted into the chat for the group to see. Because we do, as much as we can, want to get everybody's voice heard. A lot of times we can't address all the questions in the time available. So we'll do our best. And if there's any questions we can't address, we apologize. We'll do our best to try to accommodate all of that before the end of the session. Sometimes we're able to extend it after the hour, but because of the time zone difference and Alice's other requirements, we're not able to do that during this session. And so if we don't get to your question, that's my fault. So I apologize for that. Okay, so Alice, I'd like to turn it over to you, and you've got the mic, and look forward to hearing your presentation and our discussion afterwards.
All right. Well, first thing first, aloha, everyone. Thank you so very much at the invitation of CGHE that I have the opportunity to present to you and share with you my experience as a GHE practitioner in the world of HADR, or HADRs as we call it, in which I will elaborate further. So without further ado, Adrian, can you help me transition to the next slide, please? And next slide. And this is my disclaimer as a civil servant, so go ahead next. The background slide. Okay, so as Remy mentioned, the Center for Excellence in Disaster Management and Humanitarian Assistance. We are, I don't know if you mentioned, we are the part of US INDOPACOM, but essentially the center was established in 1994, attributed to a disaster back in 1992, Hurricane Iniki that hit the island of Kauai, of Hawaii, the state of Hawaii. So there are 8 islands that hit the island of Kauai, and at that time, the late Senator Daniel Inouye essentially believes that they could be, as a lesson learned from that disaster, there could be better civ-mil coordination during disasters. Therefore, as part of the legislation, he spearheaded and essentially the center was born for that cause. And to our best understanding is that we are the only DoD organization founded by Congress with this specific disaster relief and humanitarian assistance mandate. And obviously, things have shifted, so we'll see our portfolio grow, evolve throughout the time. But we are based on Fort Island. So for those who may be familiar with PACOM, it's headquartered in Camp Smith. We're sort of the satellite branch office, if we will, but we are part of the US PACOM. As I will allude to the next slide, please. Adrian? Oh, thank you. There may be a delay from my end. So as you can see on the left-hand side, our mission and vision, I won't read it to you, but if I were to summarize, our center really is focuses on 3 main, I guess, characterizing terms of our contribution to civ-mil cooperation efforts, focus in foreign disaster assistance and humanitarian assistance, as well as coordination with between DoD and other interagencies, and we call it partnerships at large. So those are our primary focus area, to sum it up for you. And on the right-hand side, our center does fall under US INDOPACOM, administratively speaking, but legislatively, we do have a global mandate per our congressional authority. Don't often have the resource, if you will, to support other COCOMs, but at the invitation of other CCMDs, we may be able to support depending on resource and availability. So our director, who is SES, does report to the US PACOM commander, Pyro right now, and on the right-hand side, there's all this dotted line of our partnerships, and also downward with our academic partnership, both foreign, domestic, civ, and military university like USIS, our very DoD, and also Naval War College, I believe, in the East Coast as well. In addition, we do work collaboratively with several international organizations such as UN OCHA and particularly its Asia Pacific Regional Office, as well as ICRC, IFRC, both are the part of the Red Cross movement. And for those who aren't familiar with those organizations, the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, it focuses on conflict settings. So during conflict negotiations where there's no state actors, they go in during peacetime, they do talk to non-state actors too, to make sure essentially be that liaison. And whereas IFRC, International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, they are the backstop of the national societies. So for example, our own American Red Cross is a member of that federation. And then you will see that highlighted in yellow, the regional organizations. So on the red, I know the logo is too small, but we do collaborate with ASEAN because it has its own, it's called AHA Center, short for AHA Center. It's ASEAN Humanitarian Assistance. It's longer acronym than that, but it's just, it's their regional coordination center. And we also have APCSS is another legacy of the late Senator Inue's Center for Strategic Security Studies, the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, also co-located on Oahu. And in the Pacific, we work with the Pacific Community, which is a intergovernmental, all the Pacific communities from the Pacific Islands. They it's a kind of essentially like a mini WHO, provide technical support of mini UN in that region. So we work globally, we work regionally, and we work with various actors. Next slide, please. And this picture speaks louder than words of thousands of words. So essentially, this oftentimes is our center justification. Why are we located in the middle of the ocean in Hawaii? Because we have a ring of fire. This region is well known for earthquakes and volcanoes. Hence, I would say natural disaster is our business. Next slide, please. So overarching thing throughout, doesn't matter what line of effort, overarching, we do provide advice and assist line of, I would say this is our umbrella overarching line of effort, if you will. So our customers are mainly US INDOPACOM leaders, commanders who may be involved with humanitarian assistance or disaster management type of activities, including practice like during military exercises especially. And we also work collaboratively. We have several interagencies as part of US INDOPACOM. There are a lot of LNOs, liaison officers such as USAID. Now we have CDC, ASPR. They're all co-located, and we do work closely as well with the GHE team as part of the US INDOPACOM Surgeon's Office. Next slide, please. So this is the quick overview of our organizational structure. What the picture you saw there is the F4 Island, which there's that bridge, Arizona Memorial is that white building right in the middle of the picture. So we have 4 teams. So I fell under the training and engagements team, branch, and then there's security cooperation and plans branch, followed by applied research and information sharing branch, as well as the newest office, adaptation and resilience office. So I will quickly walk you guys through, not in great detail, but just highlight quick bullet points as you will have the slides for reference. We are all civilian staff. That means that we all don't wear uniform. That helps us to implement, to encourage, facilitate some of the civ-mil dialogue that need to take place. And the majority of times we work in open source environment or on-class environment. We have government, civilian contractors, and I guess during the summer, winter, we collaborate with a couple academic institutions. So we have summer interns coming through, writing research papers, etc. So next slide, please. So training engagement. So I'd like you to think of two sublines of effort. So for training, our shop does provide training to DoD, all DoD entities, including contractor, government employee, uniform, through our hard course series. So it's called humanitarian assistance response training. There are two components. One is in the disaster setting, and the other one is in conflict setting. So if you're interested, feel free to go to our website, check out the next offering. Not sure it's published yet, but if anything, feel free to email me at the end as well. I'll leave my contact info with you all. And another, essentially the sublines of engagements, you can think of two types of engagements. One is military exercises that we'd be invited to support, for example, providing tabletop, providing injects, etc. Or a different form of engagement is through some of components initiatives, such as in the Indo-Pacific, such as the Pacific Partnership. Don't know how many of you on the line have heard or even engaged with. That's something I will describe further in detail. And in addition, so as needed, we help to design, collaborate with our partners to help them shape the curriculum, and all the curriculum for the HEART series, we are aligned with USAID. So when our team goes out there, oftentimes we'll invite USAID, specifically the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, to be part of the SME. So make sure that we're aligned with the whole government approach as USAID. If you're not familiar with, it is the lead federal agency in terms of when it comes to foreign disaster assistance. Next slide, please. So our security cooperation plans branch. So I don't know how many of you are already familiar with the term security cooperation, but in short, it's DoD's way to achieve national security and support foreign policy goals. I call that DoD's diplomacy tool, if you will, during peacetime. So that branch essentially supports, ensures that we align with the 3Ds, with the diplomacy, development, and defense, right? We align with US INDOPACOM's plan. Like there's so many plans at the COCOM level. Like there's concept operations. There's, I mean, there are veterans who can name all those acronyms better than I am. But I'll just highlight for you, we also support ASEAN. So ADM and Plus that you see there is actually part of the ASEAN's Defense Ministerial Meeting Plus. US is part of the Plus countries. There are expert working groups in which there are, I believe, 8 or 9 expert working group. One of them is military medicine. The other one happens to be HADR. So they are two different EWGs, but we do work kind of share notes as CFE-DM often be invited to both because of the nexus between HADR and military medicine. AHA Center, as I mentioned before, RHCC is the regional, I believe, I forgot what HC stands for, but essentially the Singaporeans equivalent of the AHA Center. They also support humanitarian assistance, and a few others. And Security Cooperation Plans branch also supports the mil-to-mil bilateral dialogue, depending on which country we'll be invited to, etc. So next slide, please. And for our applied research and information sharing branch, they are our publishing house. So I would highlight the second bullet, and you will see all those wonderful, fantastic products on our website for you to download. The majority are open source, especially our country disaster management handbooks. If you're along an airplane ride heading to the TDY, your next TDY engagement with local stakeholders, it's got a wealth of information from the local government structure to the latest who's the lead for their disaster management planning effort initiatives, and who are the key stakeholders you may want, and even local to international NGOs who has presence in that country. Next slide, please. Last but not least, in 2021, and then as part of a whole of government approach, I believe we have several, essentially across the DoD, there are climate change efforts to anticipate the potential devastating impact of extreme weather to our service members and our partner and allied nations. So the commander, again, recalling I mentioned that our director reports to the commander. So the commander then tasks our director to be the action officer to lead this climate change effort in the Indo-Pacific, within US INDOPACOM. Hence, he stood up this office. Now it's called Adaptation and Resilience Office to support a variety of RFIs or information products from our partner nations. And oftentimes when we do bilateral engagements as part of our training workshop, we will also do a SME exchange. So we have a couple in-house climate change technical experts who can advise on sea level rising or work through our partners specifically with the Pacific Disaster Center that have more advanced analytical tools to help local leaders make an informed decision from a preparedness standpoint. And next slide, please. And as we are aware that the impacts of climate change definitely will continue, and I noticed that my team actually noticed there's a great recent report published by the World Economic Forum that helped us estimate the potential cost of climate impact and associated impact on human health. So this is a great report by Oliver Wyman. You can Google it. It's a great report, lots of data points. If you want ever, for this community especially, if you ever need stats on data points, use case for justifying why it's important to include military medicine as part of the climate preparation adaptation strategies. Highly recommended. So last but not least, next slide, please. Thank you, Adrian. Quick finger. So I think I'm preaching to the choir here because many of you may be already being involved firsthand or from your learning that, I believe one of the previous topic of this webinar series touch upon One Health, right? So if there's extreme weather, and I myself witnessed the transition of chikungunya from Asia Pacific too. I was at that time supported CDC's preparedness surveillance efforts in Guatemala and Central America. So we know it's coming. We know that it's going to have human impacts to human health. Those two are tied together. And we know we have great military medicine capability to support on the preparedness standpoint, from surveillance to product development, you name it. So I will leave that hold for questions, and before we essentially, I'm happy to entertain any questions at this time point before we transition to a specific case study.
Sounds good. If you have any questions, if you could put them in the chat, that would be great. And then I think we're going to go ahead and go to a poll as well that will also kind of help prompt that. So as we go to the poll, if you have specific questions, we're going to have some discussion afterwards, which I'm really excited about. And so if you could go to this poll, which is the poll everywhere, which hopefully will give us a little bit more information about some of your experiences with disaster response and some of the issues around it. But as we think about it, Alice, I think this is great. I mean, when your center touches on so many parts of kind of the all hazards approach, I think, to disaster response, because when you think about climate change, extreme weather, One Health, people migrating, economic impact, the developing countries, and then with seawater rises, a lot of the Pacific islands, are under existential threat, due to some of the effects of climate change. I think this is pretty exciting. So there was a question from Commander Davis said, any idea when the HART course dates will be released?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick orientation to our website. So if you click on training and then the HART, you go ahead and click apply for a course. It should list all the incoming course. Yes, they publish in 2025. So hopefully that helps. And if not, please shoot me an email. I will be able to address any follow-ups after the New Year's.
Okay, that's great. All right. Any other questions? So right now we've got about 50-50 experience with some experience with, engaging on the topic of HADR, which means about nobody has, about half of us are, have heard about it and maybe read about it, but not really engaged with it. Okay. Let's see if any folks are going to respond.
I'd love to hear your definition, if you will, in terms of HADR, because we're going to do a deep dive of DoD's approach, if you will, during peacetime in HADR, which sounds funny because you would think that you would need disaster relief during a disaster, but there's a reason why I'm framing it as a HADR during peacetime.
That's great. Well, look, you know what? Let's go ahead and go in. About half of our participants don't really have much experience with it, so let's go ahead and move forward with your case report, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, and I think I didn't specify, but my objective for this case study is really to encourage folks to explore potential opportunities where GHE practitioners can further integrate with some of the existing HADR efforts within DoD. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. So these are some topics listed highlighted. I would say these are the sample topics that us, my center, CFE-DM, often sees itself with respect to HADR. So they see this immediately. These are what they call the HADR topics, right? So if you're not familiar with these, great, there's that learning curve, but you're familiar with it, you may wonder, well, some obviously climate change impacts, it's also cross-sectional to global health, which I totally agree. But I'm letting you know this is how my center sees it. And then, for example, gender, peace, and security, and by essentially one of the specific issue is gender-based violence. And a lot, I think there are like USAID funded projects on that. Our own U.S. Department of Health and Human Services are working on that as a public health issue. So essentially, those are some of the, I would say, some of the common platforms. It may not be, so essentially, if you say gender-based violence, you may not be familiar with the HADR community within DoD, but you say, oh, women peace security or gender peace security, they may be more familiar with it because that's sort of the initiative they've been learning from, right? So sometimes it's just a matter of translation and all that, how do you engage with a non-GHE, but also your uniform colleague who are logisticians, who are moving large things that they may not familiar with, medical terminologies and vice versa. So just wanted to, as a prelude. Now, I'm going to use my own experience since I joined CFE-DM, and where we had the opportunity to be invited as part of the Pacific Partnership. So is it possible to do a poll, I don't know, hand raise or just type in the chat if any of you have ever participated in Pacific Partnership or heard about it? Sorry, this is the impromptu, so I didn't give Adrian the awesome. Okay. Thank you, Commander. So if there's deficiency or you differs, obviously, I think each partnership has with its unique quirks, should I say? So feel free to chime in during our Q&A. But I will share with you from my side of the experience. Next slide, please. So for those who are not familiar, the Pacific Partnership is an annual, it's not an exercise, is a mission per the Pacific Fleet based in Hawaii as well, the U.S. Navy component. So it is a U.S. Navy-led initiative. It's born out of the 2004 tsunami that hit and specifically Indonesia and heavily impacted Sri Lanka. And U.S. and through our U.S. Navy ship, I believe Comfort is usually in the Americas region. So Mercy is the one who covers the Pacific region. That we have a hospital ship, go out there, and we do, I believe back in the days you can do direct patient care, but I don't think that's allowed since 2012 or something. The policy has obviously changed as time evolved. Our partner nations' capability also increased, right? So today, how we engage or how we support the Pacific Partnership is through these 4 lines of efforts: medical, HADAR, HNOE, which consists predominantly band playing, entertaining the kids in school and community, chaplain, outreach, etc. And then engineering, construction work, rebuilding facilities, etc. So each year, this is essentially an annual event, and then usually for our GHE community, we usually would be called under the medical line of efforts. But what I will be sharing with you is where I sit, right? I sit under the HADAR line of effort, but how we put together a workshop that also incorporates, the medical community, if you will. And that's when you have limited resource. So keep in mind, not all line of efforts are fully funded. It's like we go by annual cycle, and funding is always an issue, right? So you have to work smart and strategically to how to collaborate with your brothers and sisters from different line of efforts to make it a successful event. So next slide, please. So bottom line up front, in 2022, this is like a middle of pandemic or tail end. So CFE-DM was invited as part of the HADAR line of effort to support several workshops. One of which I led was on risk communications, or public health risk communications. And for Palau, is unique in the sense that it's not our typical BILAD, because they don't have a military force. Their military force are us, so U.S. forces. So we can't really, if we say we're going to go there and train their military force, essentially you're talking about U.S. training U.S., which doesn't make sense, right? So in Palau, so what happened in Palau was essentially the planning and organization of these workshops through, I believe, 6 to 9 months of ongoing dialogues, virtual. This is still tail end of the pandemic. We have virtual calls with local counterparts, identifying their needs, and at that time, risk communication bubble up, right? So as a HADAR lead, I also want to make sure that, hey, we're talking about public health risk communication, is something that the medical line of effort is interested. If not, then we know that the US CDC has already has investment, like a program. They have long-term, it's kind of like development side. They have multi-year funding to support our freely associated states, namely Palau, RMI, Republic of Marshall Islands, and the Federated FSM, Federated States of Micronesia, to strengthen their public health system, right? From health system strengthening aspect, right? So around to the surgeon, then the PAC Fleet Surgeon's office, they say, okay, risk communication sounds more like HADAR, so well, you're welcome to incorporate as part of our HADAR workshop, right? So got a green light, work alongside with CDC colleagues, our interagency counterpart. And next slide, please. And we put together this workshop. So essentially, based on the needs, based on the understanding of their infrastructure, aka their emergency operations center, how it's done, on the topics requested, and the radiation disaster was a very specific one in that region. So there's still a lot of nuclear waste, if you will, from our legacy period, and there are some concerns, community-based concerns on that. And infodemic was prevalent during COVID, and CERC was a CDC tool, but essentially that's their package of risk communication for emergencies. So we collaborated on this effort. Unfortunately, one CDC SME couldn't make it, so that's why we had a hybrid version. but both. So I want to highlight the picture on the lower bottom. The gentleman in white shirt, he is the lead for the local national, the Palau disaster manager, essentially the FEMA equivalent lead. And then the lady in the green jacket, she is the Minister of Health. So we have a interagency in Palau and also interagency US to have this kind of collaboration. I think in larger countries like Vietnam, Thailand, you may not see such a great diverse stakeholders. And because in Palau, for example, the vice president wears 3 hats. She is the National Emergency Coordination Chair, and also the Minister of Public Infrastructure and Industries. So I don't know how she did all her jobs, but in a smaller Pacific island, one personnel wears multiple hats. So that's something that the biggest takeaway is that, hey, when we engage, especially in smaller countries, let's be mindful of the resources that we also, that is one of their local hotel sites that we're using and sharing with other workshops. So next slide, please.
Hey, Alice, just in the interest of time, are you okay if we go ahead and move to kind of talking about partnerships and conclusions so we can get into some discussion?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, just flying by. So the following year, this is in Papua New Guinea. So I believe similar, ongoing dialogue with local counterparts and recognizing of international organizations who are already there for long-term development work, right? Pacific Partnership Annual, coming in different people. A lot of the projects are long-term in a lot of this low and middle-income countries. And I believe at that time, NETMU-6, Navy, environmental, sorry, I had to think of acronyms here, but and help me out, Ren. I think you were just there recently. So essentially, Navy's component, they have expertise in the house, so they supported the public health and vector-borne disease considerations in disaster response. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th bullet on the right. So as you mentioned, as Remy mentioned, next slide, please. CFE-DM couldn't have supported all this initiative without partnership. So in the importance of partnership, and I would like to highlight one of our newest addition is with USIS's National Center for Disaster Medicine and Public Health. Our newest partnership as they now lead the HELP course, Health Emergency in Large Populations course. That was formerly organized by CFE-DM, but we are very excited that they are in much better from a capacity standpoint to lead that course going forward. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thanks, Alice. I mean, that was really spectacular, and it's really interesting to me how your center touches on so many different aspects of disaster response and the humanitarian interaction supporting that, as well as having an educational kind of component to it. So I've got a couple questions. I'll start. If the participants have any specific questions in the chat, go ahead and put those in there. And if not, I've got a whole list of questions. So don't feel like I think we'll run out of time before we run out of questions. So one of the things I'd like to kind of talk about is, your center was established in 1994, and in the last 20 years, our focus in the Pacific has really changed, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, especially as we think about preparing against our pacing threat in the Pacific with China and its kind of regional influence, and especially for the military preparing for large-scale combat operations. Can you tell us your thoughts about the overlap between disaster preparedness and humanitarian assistance with preparing for conflict, and what things you think are similar and what things do you think are completely exclusive of each other?
So if I were to leverage our current real world events, NATO, right? I think I have heard at military medicine conferences where people talk about, NATO's model that's used in the Indo-Pacific. But as I alluded to earlier, in the Pacific, especially for the Southeast Asia nations, they have ASEAN. they are SOPs in place, and oftentimes they need to be exercised. I think my personal opinion, if you will, right, because as I mentioned earlier too, our center is really focusing on natural disaster. But my understanding is that from the whole government standpoint, as a USG, we are preparing for potential, how can we ameliorate the, occurrence of potential conflict, especially in this region. It's obviously the tension was there. We all kind of, I'm sure you all kind of frivolously checking your phone about South Korea yesterday. Thank goodness it wasn't a, I think, actual crisis. It was self-inflicted, right? In that sense. But I think from a human health perspective, right, you were talking about, I mean, if you have a, I'm comparing my conflict with 9/11, right? If there's two, jets hitting the building collapse versus a building that collapsed because of a huge earthquake. Outcome, human impact are the same. Like you're maybe from those who are in medicine. I don't know, for me, a layperson, civilian background, how you treat a wound, does it differ, right? It's gonna be trauma, right? It's gonna be building collapse on human body. Right, there's going to be shortage of supplies, food, water, sanitaries, all those basics, fundamentals, right? And mental health, psychosocial support is equally important. From those aspects, I see the impacts of disaster, all hazards. If you include conflict as part of all hazard too, right, man-made, what have you, then that's how we we can address. But obviously, I am also a epi background, so from the perspective of what differs in the route of transmission, right? Then how people get injured differ, and how people acquired, like for a natural disaster, if we anticipate a flood, then we anticipate some kind of vector-borne disease after cholera and things like that nature. But for a conflict, it's a different type of transmission, right? So you may have an influx, a surge of population refugees, right, in unsanitary conditions. Vaccination, we have tools for that, but how do you maneuver in a conflict zone? Like the access was blocked. You have to think differently in that sense, from the access standpoint. So I think those are the two biggest difference, like from access for the difference will be access point in a conflict versus natural disaster. And similarity would be the impact to human health. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. So kind of a follow-on question that is, so like I think I told you I pulled the US code that established your center. And as I read through that, there's the only thing that it says in there that's specific to INDOPACOM is developing a repository of disaster risk indicators. And so I know you guys have kind of a global look. And so, Colonel Erickson put in the text about, even though you're kind of under INDOPACOM, US INDOPACOM as kind of your command and control, you do have a global mandate. And so if folks have a request for support, how would they route that to your center? Or could you give could you give some examples of how your center has worked outside the INDOPACOM region?
So my understanding is that sometimes I would say, I don't want to misquote, but I do believe that senior leadership, I don't remember at the ambassador level, or are you guys familiar with security cooperation officers or defense attaches, essentially, right, in different embassies? Okay, so if that person, right, sends an email to our director or to me, then I'll escalate up to my leadership, right? Say, hey, can we support this? We have to triage, right? But at the same time, it's better they come with funding, right? So we are ready to go. We just need to put the concept note together, and especially comes in funding. And that's a key because we are in Hawaii, and I think last time my trip to Indonesia took 19 hours, right? So if we're gonna go to other parts of the globe, it's gonna be more costly as well, right? But first thing first, we'll leverage our partners, like if they are some of our through our international organizations. For example, if you're looking for a speaker on international humanitarian law, right, we could hook you up with SME from ICRC to speak with that, and they have regional offices. So that's one way we support. And I believe for HEART, I did hear that we did at the Invitational Southcom, for example, we did train their unit. That's part of Southcom. I don't have the details. So HEART is managed by one of my colleague. So, but happy to entertain any RFIs and happy to escalate any inquiries or invitations on your behalf. But for invitations, if come with funding, easy peasy, right? Because what I learned too during my time with US INDOPACOM is that both GHE and HADAR, I think we've been applying for the same type of funding for years. And in case this may be helpful to some of the planners out here, one of the commonly used funding mechanisms called ODACA. So OHDACA oversees humanitarian, disaster, and civic aid. So that's a very common type of funding. I believe it should be accessible by all COCOMs. I could be wrong, but the administrating agency is DISCA. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, no, that's great. I think, one, just knowing that your center exists, if you're kind of located mainly in the Pacific, but your experience has been in EUCOM or CENTCOM or AFRICOM, it literally is on the other side of the world. And so, you may not even know about the center and know that it does have that global mandate. So even just have a point of contact that, can connect the connectors, so to speak. Can you give us an idea of like how big your center is? Because I think a lot of times that's helpful to know, kind of the bandwidth of the organization. Because just to speak for our center here at CGHE, we're about 30 or less people, and so we try to produce more than than a 30-person center does, but a lot of that is through connection and support and enabling others.
Yeah, it sounds about the same. So we often say 30, but my understanding is that we have some part-time contractors residing elsewhere that contribute to our wonderful collection of disaster management handbooks. Else we all be writing it. All 30 of us. It's definitely a significant production there. Yeah. And speaking of contractors, we do have in Europe, we do have 2 part-time contractors that are in the humanitarian background. So again, it's depends on where the needs are. I joke sometimes we're the matchmaker, if you will, of HADAR partners.
Mm-hmm. So I don't see any other questions in the chat yet. So let me ask another question, which is, where is your center looking forward? Like what do you think the next threat is going to be, or what are the things that your center is excited about trying to lean into to try to get ahead of some of these challenges in the future?
I do believe the Pacific, because, and as I shared with you earlier, we start our engagement with, we've been invited to Pacific Partnership since late 2021-ish, and since then our center has been consistently supporting this initiative, and partly attributed to there's a lot of players in the Pacific, and with, you mentioned the great competition with our competitors, we essentially, instead of doing one-offs using our own resource, why don't we tag along, right? So from the HADAR line of effort alone, I think I also witnessed it grow over just this past 4 years or so, from our center supporting that HADAR line of effort to Coast Guard jumping in, there's Army Reserve, I forgot the MSC, Army's reservists, they jump in, they even send boots on the ground for I don't know how many, maybe 1-year rotations throughout the Oceania, the Pacific Island countries. And it's been a hit. I think we are relying on some boots on the ground nowadays, especially in the very remote area, to get our message across and get the response and feedback from the partner nations. So definitely Pacific, and obviously with the first line of defense, I'm not well versed in that military term jargon, if you will, but definitely Philippines, we have close ties, and in fact, we have a field staff now in the Philippines, Thailand, and then most recently, we dispatched our one of our contractors to Taiwan to serve as a liaison. So again, in addressing the potential great competition in the region, that's where our focus may be in the future. And obviously align with whichever top priority that come down through the pipeline from Pentagon.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that answer. I think maybe one more question, which is kind of in the spirit of the all hazards approach, at looking at the military and militaries with our partners responding to disaster response. We often kind of assume the benefits and we talk a lot about the benefits. What do you see as the biggest risks that we need to be aware of in using a military force as part of an HADR response that we should maybe be aware of going into it, and maybe, at least being aware of it, we might be able to mitigate it?
In my in HADR community, we have this phrase, push or pull. You force resource into a community, or you let this community ask what their needs are. So I think one risk, as you mentioned, military would like to go big or go home. Oftentimes we want to be that hero, shiro, first line of responder, but oftentimes per our governance structure, per our coordination structure, we are not. So for the US, USAID is a lead federal agency, not DoD. So we also always have to keep that in mind, and not to step on our interagency's toe, and also how we best to represent the USA at large. That's a whole government approach. They are mill-to-mill engagements, exchanges, and they are exception to the rule. But that's something that I encourage you to attend our hard course to learn more. They will divulge a lot of more detail, a lot more case studies, and you kind of also pick up a lot of lingo that not maybe less familiar to the GHE community, but what the HADRs are using, so that you may be already familiar with them by the time that you've been asked to deploy in support of a humanitarian crisis or disaster response and in real world. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for answering those questions, and thank you for the questions from the audience. Let me just again thank you for carving some time out of your day, and please pass on our thanks to Mr. Martin, I believe, who's your director, for making you available to us, and on behalf of our center, and specifically Colonel Erickson, who's our director, thank you for sharing with us this important information, I think, which all of us need to be aware of. And so any final comments or questions? And only thing I'll kind of leave is that, I would highly recommend folks take a look at the website with the resources and the country kind of emergency plans, because I think that may be an untapped resource of knowledge for the GHE community. So Alice, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I want to make sure I address our FAQ here, and I'll take that feedback to our team. Maybe we need to simplify our website a little bit, not too deep. So for those who are interested in HEART, go ahead and click on Training tab on our website. And then once you're on the homepage of each respective course, whether you're looking for HEART disaster or HEART conflict, go ahead and click that red calendar that says Apply for a course. Don't worry, when you click it, you will not be automatically applying for the course, but it will lead you to the course that been planned at various installations, units, etc. So yeah, sorry for the wine-rounded description, but yeah, we need to simplify and make it user-friendly for future reference. So, and thank you so much for the opportunity to, and taking your time from your busy schedule as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Adrian. I'll turn it back over to you for kind of final announcements and comments.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Wilson. And thank you again, Ms. Tsai, for your expertise and leading the discussion here. Before we close up for the day, just a couple of communications and sharing of resources for you all. So the first one there is the center produces these short thought papers called DoD Snapshots. And the latest issue is our very own KM programming for the DoD GHE enterprise, where we basically describe how we are approaching mobilizing knowledge and fostering a knowledge sharing culture among the community. So specifically, as you join peers, this is one of the mechanisms that we have initiated in the year, and looking forward to more for the years to come. We also publish a quarterly newsletter from our communications team with just center news, events, and updates. And just so you all know, just a reminder that the slides and the recording will be shared afterwards, so you can access these links later on as well. I've already shared the links to the training page and the publications page that Alice mentioned earlier in the presentation. A lot of great resources there, so please do take a look. And then we also have, for the next slide, a couple of events coming up. I'm not sure if any on the line is attending the Global Health Engagement Operations course. If you are, we're looking forward to having you here at our offices. But just a little bit on that, our training and engagements team hosts several courses throughout the year. And to close out 2024, they will be hosting this week-long GHE course for GHE stakeholders at the operational level. So looking forward to that. And then if you are new to the global health engagement space, the team also offers a fundamentals course, usually virtual, several times throughout the year. So the first one is going to be in January. And I believe there is still some registrations left for that. And then finally, for us at least, the next Peer 6 will be in February 2025. We are working behind the scenes to finalize the topic for that. So stay tuned. We will be sharing that out in the coming month or so.
Sorry, Adrian.
We also have an update just for GHE in general. Next slide. So within the military health space, December is DoD GHE month. So please head over to health.mil in the GHE site over there. They have general GHE news across the Joint Force, and a couple of our policy documents and authorities are also listed on there for your review. And then finally, we would love to hear from you. Several call to action points over here. We're always wanting to improve our peers mechanism, ensuring that we are facilitating it to our audience needs and requirements. So please share your feedback for Peers 5 in the short survey link. I am actually going to drop now. And Alice, I see that your hand is up. You're right ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but 2 slides ago, I just want to clarify. So HELP has now been under NCD-MPH's leadership. I have pasted their website accordingly in the chat. So they did start the HELP course this year. Just want to clarify that because we left it on the webpage for sort of the transitioning period for those who are interested in the history, et cetera, but it's now under the leadership of NCD-MPH. Over.
Thank you so much. We'll be sure to change that up when we send the slide deck over. Thank you. And then a couple more calls to action here. So if you all have a topic in the GHE realm that you would like featured on Peers, please do message us at cghe@usuhs.edu. We also love featuring adjacent topics, so looking at intersections of just different spaces as well. So if you're interested, feel free to message us, and would love to coordinate that with you. Another new initiative we launched late this year is What's Your GHE Story? We are working to curate GHE successes, best practices, and lessons learned to, again, mobilize that knowledge and expertise across the enterprise. And so if you are interested in learning more about this GHE Story initiative, email us at that same email address as well. And then the DoD GHE Community of Practice has a platform on MilSuite. We usually share news, updates, resources, and invites to events over there. So if you would love to keep updated on that, please join the community Mill Suite is behind the CAC firewall for those interested. And then finally, just for more public sharing, if you haven't already done so, join our center distro list and you will receive what I've mentioned before, our quarterly newsletters, our DoD snapshot resources, and other knowledge products that we produce and share out. And then the last slide before we close is just our socials. Stay connected with us and all of these platforms. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending. And hopefully everyone has a pleasant December and a happy new year in 2025. Thank you.
Happy holidays.